These are your notes on a shortcut called FOIL. So these should follow the multiplying polynomials notes. And FOIL is an acronym we use to help us remember a shortcut in multiplying binomial polynomials. So it only works if it's a binomial times another binomial. And it is a little bit less work than using the distributive method. I will show you on one of our examples a side-by-side comparison as to the work involved in FOIL and then the work involved in distributive. But remember, it only works when you have a two-term multiplied by another two-term. You cannot FOIL any other product. And the reason it works, the letters FOIL, F-O-I-L, there are 4 of them. And that means you had 2 numbers from the one quantity times 2 numbers from the other quantity. And that makes 4 total multiplications. So each letter represents what 2 terms should be multiplied in the problem. So it's just an easy way to remember that everybody got multiplied by everybody else. So the F in FOIL is telling us that we should multiply the first terms. So when you use FOIL, you really don't have to split up one of the polynomials. You can leave them in their original form. And the letters of FOIL tell us who gets multiplied so that we don't forget any and that we don't repeat too many. So everybody gets multiplied by everybody. Remember the goal.
Excuse the interruption. There's a transition class going on at Miss Kennedy's room for 4th hour. If you're supposed to be there, please make your way there. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So remember in multiplication that every term in one quantity, the x and the 5 in this first quantity, needs to get multiplied by every term in the second quantity, the x minus 2. So FOIL, the first terms get multiplied. And what that means when it says the first terms, we're talking about the term that comes first in each of these quantities. So that would be this x is first in that quantity, and this x here is first in the second quantity. So we would multiply these two things together, and you'd end up with x times x, or x squared. The O in FOIL stands for outer terms. You're going to multiply the outer terms. So the outer terms are just that. They're on the outside. Remember, you have to pick one term from the first parentheses and one from the second parentheses. So for the outer, it's going to be this x because it's on the outside parenthesis, and this 2 because it's on the outside of the parenthesis. And so x times a negative 2 is a negative 2x. So that would be your outer. The I in FOIL stands for the inner terms. So you're going to take the 2 innermost terms, one from each quantity. And so you can probably guess that it's going to be the 2 that are touching the inside parentheses. So that's this positive 5 and this positive x here. So 5 times x is a positive 5x. And the L stands for last. You're going to multiply the last terms. If we multiply the first terms in the beginning, we're going to multiply the last terms in the end. And so the last terms are the last ones in each quantity. That would be this 5 and this negative 2. So 5 times negative 2. And that's negative 10. So I kind of color coordinated each of the quantities. I tried to use my arrows to color coordinate so you can make sense of the first, outer, inner, last. So you should have 4 multiplications. And just like before, the 2 middle terms you can combine usually. And so a negative 2x and a positive 5x leaves us with a positive 3x. And so we have a trinomial answer, x squared plus 3x minus 10. So today is just going to be about practicing that FOIL. So all of them today will be binomial times binomial products. So look at number 1 here. First, in the FOIL, would be the y times the y, and that gives you a positive y squared. The O is the y on the outside here, and the negative 4 in the other one. They're the outer terms. They're touching the outside parentheses. So a y times a negative 4 is a negative 4y. The I for inner are these two innermost terms. Positive 8 and a y makes positive 8y. And last is taking the 8, that's the last term in that quantity, times it by the negative 4, and you end up with negative 32. Combine like terms, we got negative 4y, positive 8y, y squared, plus 4y, minus 32. Next problem. First, 2x times x, 2x squared. Outer, 2x times 6 is a positive 12x. Inner, 1 times x is a positive 1x. And last, 1 times 6 is a positive 6. 12 x's and another x makes 13 total x's. So we have 2x squared plus 13x plus 6. Number 3, we have same numbers, just an opposite sign there. So some different things are going to happen here, but we can still use FOIL. 5m times 5m for our first is 25m squared. Outer, 5m times negative 3 is negative 15m. Inner is the 3 times the 5m, positive 15m. And last is the 3 with the negative 3, which gives negative 9. And so we end up with 25m squared. Our outer and inner this time cancel. You have a positive and a negative 15m that cancels. And so we're left with 25m squared minus 9. I do want to mention, if you look at my arrows, my first and my outer arrows up above are just distributing. First is taking the 5m and distributing it to the 5m in the other. Outer is taking that same 5m and distributing it to the second term. And then we're going to distribute the 3 through the 5m and then the 3 through the negative 3. So we are using the distributive property. We're just not splitting it up and writing down all that work. By using the letters FOIL, we can just sort of know that that's going to happen. So for number 4, I still recommend getting rid of the squared and rewriting it twice so you don't make any mistakes. So 3x minus 7 times 3x minus 7. My first is a 3x times a 3x, which makes 9x squared. Outer, 3x times a negative 7 is negative 21x. Inner, negative 7 times a positive 3x is another negative 21x. And last is a negative 7 times a negative 7, which becomes positive 49. So these two middle terms are exactly the same because they were squared. So negative 21x makes negative 42x. So 9x squared minus 42x. 42x plus 49. I would like to show you right next to that problem what it looks like, or the steps that we could save in work for that particular problem. So if I just take this problem here, oh, I don't like that. Take that back. Let me show you one more problem side by side. So I'll just do a quick, you don't have to do this, just watch. If I do x plus 1 and then an x minus 3, using FOIL, I get x squared minus 3x plus 1x minus 3, or I end up with x squared minus 2x minus 3. Right next to it, I'd like to do the same problem, just the old way of splitting it up. And so when you split this apart, if I take the x plus 1 and I split it up, we get to save ourselves this whole step right there of rewriting. So I get an x squared still. I'll get a negative 3x like I did with FOIL. I'll get a positive 1x like I did with FOIL, and a negative 3. And I still have to put them together. So what you do is you save yourself this whole step right here, which is kind of time consuming. Eventually, as you get into the older other classes, you'll eventually save even more steps. But remember, this only works with binomial times binomial. All right, so that is FOIL. I'd like to describe what each letter of FOIL represents, and then I'd like you to actually use FOIL to multiply those two binomials.